There is a voice in your head that you think is yours. It speaks in your tone. It uses your vocabulary, and it knows your deepest insecurities. But have you ever stopped to ask, if you are the one listening to the voice, then who is the one speaking? This is the most dangerous illusion of the human condition. We believe we are the thinkers of our thoughts. We are not. Most of you are merely the hosts for a broadcast you did not choose to tune into. Right now, as you listen to this, pay attention to the physical sensation in your body. Notice the tightness behind your eyes, or that subtle, heavy knot forming in the center of your chest. That is not just anxiety. That is a biological response to an intrusion. You clicked on this video because you have felt it, a repetitive, spiraling loop of negativity that seems to turn on automatically, usually when you are weakest, tired, or alone. It feels like a program running in the background, draining your battery, eating your life force. History has given this parasite many names. The Christians called it demons. The Gnostics called it the archons. Jung called it the shadow. But the indigenous peoples of the Americas, the Cree and the Algonquin, they had a name that was far more precise and far more terrifying. They called it Wetiko. And they did not classify it as a metaphor. They classified it as a virus, a mind virus that feeds on human consciousness. The modern world tells you that your negative thoughts are a chemical imbalance, a defect in your brain, or a lack of discipline. This is a comforting lie. It is easier to believe you are broken than to accept that you are being fed upon. But look closely at the nature of these thoughts. They are parasitic. They do not serve your survival. They actively sabotage it. They urge you to destroy relationships, to fear the future, to isolate yourself. Do you feel that resistance rising up? That sudden urge to skip this video, or the thought that this is too dark or nonsense? Capture that thought. Hold it still. That is not you being skeptical. That is the parasite protecting its camouflage. It knows that the moment you see it as separate from yourself, its power begins to dissolve. Stay with the discomfort. We are about to turn the lights on. To defeat an enemy, you must first understand its biology. And the biology of Wetiko is elusive because it is not made of flesh and bone. It is made of psychic energy and mimicry. In the lore of the Cree and Algonquin peoples, the Wetiko, or Wendigo, was described as a cannibalistic spirit driven by insatiable greed. The more it ate, the hungrier it became. But this was never just a story about a monster in the woods. It was a coded warning about a specific frequency of consciousness. The indigenous elders understood that humans could be infected by a spirit of selfishness and consumption so profound that it would devour their humanity. Translated into modern psychological terms, Wetiko is a psychic pathogen. It is a mind virus that operates through a mechanism of covert mimicry. It does not attack you from the outside. It installs itself into your ego structure and pretends to be you. When you attack yourself with guilt, when you replay a mistake you made 10 years ago at 3 a.m., who is benefiting? You are suffering. Your body is releasing cortisol. Your vibration is dropping. You gain nothing, yet the process continues. Why? Because the virus is feeding. It converts your creative life force into the heavy, dense energy of shame. It is quite literally cannibalizing your potential to sustain its own existence. Carl Jung, the great explorer of the unconscious, encountered this same force. He called it the shadow, but he went further. He warned that people don't have ideas, ideas have people. He saw that when the shadow is suppressed, when we deny our capacity for darkness, it becomes autonomous. It splits off from the conscious personality and begins to operate on its own, like a rogue AI program running contrary to the user's intent. But here is the crucial distinction that most spiritual seekers miss. There is a difference between a simple negative habit and Wetiko. A habit is passive. Wetiko is active and predatory. It has a survival instinct. Have you ever noticed that the moment you decide to improve your life, to meditate, to create, to break an addiction, the negative voice becomes louder. It becomes vicious. Recall a time you tried to step into a new version of yourself. Remember the sudden wave of lethargy, the inexplicable brain fog, or the sharp, stinging voice of self-doubt that seemed to scream, "Who do you think you are?" That backlash was not random. That was the parasite fighting for its life. It knows that if you rise in frequency, you become uninhabitable. This entity thrives on what we call the counterfeit spirit. It mimics the holy. It masquerades as justice when we judge others. It masquerades as protection when it keeps us fearful of the unknown. It masquerades as love when we try to control those close to us. It is the great deceiver, draping itself in the robes of our own internal dialogue, making us believe that its hunger is our desire. To diagnose Wetiko is to realize that you have been carrying a passenger that hates the host. The Native Americans said that Wetiko has a heart of ice. This is the perfect metaphor for the lack of empathy that characterizes this infection. When you are under its influence, you lose the ability to feel the humanity of others, and, more importantly, you lose the ability to feel compassion for yourself. You become cold. You become a machine of calculation and fear. This is the autopsy of the ghost haunting your machine. Now we must look at the dinner table. What does a psychic parasite eat? It does not feed on the events of your life, it feeds on your reaction to them. Specifically, Wetiko consumes identification. The moment an intrusive thought arises, "I'm a failure, they hate me, it's all hopeless," and you agree with it, you have just served a meal. You have fused your sovereign consciousness with a parasitic signal. The virus needs the word "I" to survive. It needs you to claim the negativity as your own property. Consider the physics of this interaction. Emotions are energy in motion. They are meant to flow through the body like water. But Wetiko creates emotional viscosity. It makes the energy thick, sticky, and stagnant. When you obsess over a perceived insult for 3 days, replaying the scenario in high definition, you are not processing an emotion. You are keeping a bioenergetic circuit open so the parasite can drain your battery. You are doing the work of the virus for it. But its favorite delicacy is not sadness, it is righteous indignation. This is the trap that catches the most intelligent minds. Wetiko thrives on polarization. It loves the feeling of, "I am right and they are evil." When you scroll through social media feeling that surge of hot, sharp anger at the state of the world or the stupidity of others, you feel powerful, you feel superior. But that feeling is a trap. Check your body the next time you are deep in judgment or moral outrage. Notice that subtle, sickly sweet rush in your chest. It feels like a hit of sugar, followed by a hollow exhaustion. That is the dopamine of the ego, and it is the primary food source of the Wetiko virus. It gives you a momentary high of superiority to distract you while it eats your peace. It makes you addicted to conflict because conflict generates the chaotic frequency where it lives. This is why the virus spreads so easily in groups. It jumps from person to person through the vector of accusation. The moment you point a finger in pure hatred at the infected ones, you become infected yourself. You mimic the very aggression you claim to despise. The virus does not care which side of the argument you are on, as long as you are vibrating in the frequency of hatred. It plays both sides of the chessboard. To starve it, you must understand that your suffering is not yours. It is an external weather pattern that you have mistakenly invited into your living room. The parasite fears nothing more than a host who can observe pain without becoming the pain. When you stop identifying, the food supply is cut off. The emotional viscosity thins out. The loop breaks. But be warned, when you stop feeding it, the withdrawal symptoms will begin.
We must now bridge the gap between ancient prophecy and modern biology. The skeptic will say that Wetiko is a fairy tale, but a neuroscientist, if they are honest, will point to a specific region of the brain, the default mode network. This is a constellation of brain regions that activates when you are not focused on the outside world. It is the neurological seat of the autobiographical self, the storyteller. It is where you worry about the future, ruminate on the past, and obsess over your identity. This is the cockpit where the Wetiko virus sits. When the DMN is hyperactive, you are literally trapped in a simulation of your own making. The virus hijacks this network to run what we call doom loops. Neuroscience has a law for this, Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together wire together. Every time you engage with an intrusive thought, every time you let the parasite drag you into a 20-minute scenario of catastrophe, you are not just thinking, you are physically building a superhighway in your brain. You are laying down the fiber optic cables that allow the virus to travel faster and harder the next time. This explains why fighting negative thoughts is a strategic disaster. This is the biological trap. To fight a thought, you must focus on it. You must hold it in your awareness to push against it. In the realm of quantum mechanics and neurology, attention is energy. By fighting the shadow, you are feeding it the very attention it craves. You are trying to put out a fire by pouring gasoline on it, simply because you hate the fire. The virus loves your resistance. It converts your struggle into structural reinforcement. Consider the physical sensation of trying to stop a panic attack or a rage spiral. Does it feel light? No. It feels like a pressure cooker. Your muscles tense, your breath shortens, and the thoughts race faster. That pressure is the biological evidence of a feedback loop going critical. You are vibrating at the exact frequency of the problem, so you cannot be the solution. We must look at this through the lens of frequency resonance. Wetiko operates within a very specific bandwidth of consciousness, a low-frequency state characterized by contraction, fear, and survival stress. It is like a radio station broadcasting on 88.5 FM. If your consciousness is tuned to 88.5 FM, you will hear the broadcast, and it will sound like reality. But if you shift your internal state, if you recalibrate your nervous system to a frequency of neutrality or gratitude, the signal turns to static. The virus does not disappear, you simply become invisible to it. This is the biology of possession. You are not being possessed by a demon in the Hollywood sense. You are being possessed by a neural pathway that you have unwittingly reinforced for decades. The ghost is in the machine, but the machine is rewiring itself every time you react. To reclaim your mind, we must stop the reinforcement. We must learn the art of biological starvation. We must learn to look at the monster without blinking and without feeding it a single drop of our fear.
The only way to kill a parasite that feeds on reaction is to stop reacting. You cannot shout it out, you cannot analyze it out, and you certainly cannot worry it out. You must starve it out. This requires a radical shift in your internal posture, from a soldier fighting a war to a scientist observing a specimen. We call this the starvation protocol, and it begins with a linguistic surgery, the separation of pronouns. Step 1. Naming the beast. Disidentification. The virus hacks your language center to use the word I. I am anxious. I am unworthy. Your first move is to break this grammatical bond. When the thought arises, do not say I, say it. Change I am dying inside to I notice a sensation of heaviness. Change I am a failure to the mind is generating a story about failure. This sounds simple, but it is an exorcism. By removing the I, you remove the hook. The virus cannot attach to a smooth surface. It needs the Velcro of your identity. Step 2. The vampire gaze, the optical antidote. This is the most advanced and dangerous technique. In folklore, the vampire turns to dust when exposed to sunlight. In the psyche, the Wetiko virus dissolves when exposed to the light of non-reactive awareness. When a terrifying or shameful thought enters your mind, do not look away. Do not distract yourself with your phone. Instead, turn your internal gaze directly onto the thought. Stare at it. Apply the vampire gaze, intense, unwavering observation without judgment. Ask the thought, I see you. What are you? What do you want? You will discover a glitch in the matrix. Under the pressure of your pure, neutral attention, the thought will not grow stronger, it will wither. It will begin to lose its emotional charge. The monster cannot survive when the lights are on. It requires the shadows of your avoidance to exist. The moment you look at it and do not flinch, you reclaim your sovereignty. Step 3. Creative alchemy. Wetiko is the spirit of consumption. It consumes energy, resources, and life. The exact opposite frequency of consumption is creation. The virus cannot exist in a mind that is in a state of flow. When you feel the infection rising, the loop of worry, the urge to doom scroll, physically force yourself to create something. Write one sentence, draw one line, cook a meal, build a shelf. Notice what happens to the tension in your stomach the moment you engage your hands in meaningful work. The energy shifts, the static in your head clears,
because the energy that was being siphoned by the parasite is now being channeled into the physical world. You are taking the raw material of your anxiety and alchemizing it into reality. This is the ultimate rebellion. To create is to declare that you are the master of your own house. You must practice these steps not when you feel good, but when you feel your worst. That is the test. The virus will scream. It will tell you that it is too hard, that you are too tired. That is not the truth. That is the dinner bell of the parasite, hoping you will ring it one last time. Do not ring it. Let it starve.
There is a final paradox that you must understand, or else you will leave this video fearing the dark instead of mastering it. Wetiko is not merely an enemy. In the grand architecture of the universe, it serves a function. It is the friction that forces the soul to polish itself. Without this adversary, without this predator of the mind, human beings would likely remain asleep forever, drifting in a comfortable, unconscious daze. The virus demands that you become conscious. It forces you to choose moment by moment between fear and love, between reaction and observation. It is a ruthless teacher, yes. It will eat you alive if you ignore the lesson. But if you learn the lesson, if you learn to stand in the center of the storm and not identify with the wind, you develop a strength that would be impossible to acquire in paradise. You are not just healing for yourself. We live in a holographic universe. When you starve the Wetiko virus in your own mind, you are acting as a biological antibody for the entire human species. You are breaking a chain of transmission that is likely run through your family line for generations. You are the circuit breaker. The trauma, the fear, the automatic hatred, it stops with you. So the next time the darkness whispers, the next time the intrusive thought tries to slide a knife between your ribs, do not run, do not fight. Turn around, face it with the cold, absolute stillness of a sovereign being. Look it in the eye and watch it dissolve into the nothingness from which it came. The infection ends the moment you realize you are not the host. You are the sun.